Hello everybody, the Destiny 2 PC beta has started, and it's essentially the same thing as the console beta that we got like a month ago. But we're in a very interesting situation that we'll talk about here. So this is going to be my thoughts on the PC beta, and focusing more on a lot of technical things than necessarily, gameplay things, although we will talk significantly on gameplay itself. But the reason we're in an interesting situation is because this game launches in a week for the consoles, but for PC it launches in 2 months. It's October 24th, I believe, is the launch date for the PC, and that leaves us in a very interesting situation because it means that this beta, which doesn't have a lot of substance to it, the beta is essentially just the start of the game, which is really cool, and a strike, which is essentially like a 3-man dungeon, and then 2 PvP things. And it's like, okay, cool, we get that. That's cool. We don't want to see too much of the game. I get why you would limit that down. But we, as PC players, aren't really getting to see more of the game, so it's hard to determine whether or not it will be worth it to pick up from a content point of view. But this is why it's interesting, is because in such a short amount of time, we're going to see what the full game is like on console. We're going to be able to see review scores and stuff before it ever even comes out on PC. And we'll be able to determine whether or not, content-wise, we should pick it up at that point, once the game is actually already out. And it should give you a pretty good idea of whether or not to pre-order. This is one of those really interesting situations where you'll be able to play the free PC beta to see if it runs on your PC, right? So you can kind of get that out of the way. And then on the second hand of it, you're going to be able to see people streaming it, people playing it, and people reviewing it in a short amount of time, the full game. So that will give you an idea of, what content is there. And if you liked the PC beta, then you know that you'll like the game if everything else falls in line. So it's really weird. And we don't get this situation often. Usually it's a situation where either the game launches at the same time on console or on PC at the same time, or it's ported a year later and by then it's old news. So it's weird to get it just 2 months after. So let's talk about this beta. First and foremost, PC stuff. It runs really well. It's a good port. It's a good PC port. It's good. I'm happy to say that. I was very, very worried that it was not going to be. The game isn't the best looking game. It looks like a shooter from several years ago on PC. It's not necessarily anything to write home about, but it's not a bad looking game. Some of the effects are really cool. Most importantly, it plays really well because it runs really well. And what I mean by this is I'm at max settings, everything maxed out, and I have my frame rate up in the top right. This is the in-game setting for the frame rate, so you can see pretty much what the game is outputting up there. And you can see that at no point do I drop below 60 unless it's a cutscene, at which they're all locked at 30, which is fine. That's usually the case. But when it boils down to the game, it's always running at 70 plus on max settings, which is great. That's really good to see. I'm running a 980 Ti, which is the reference card. I'm not running a EVGA or anything. It's the NVIDIA 980 Ti. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM, and my processor is a i5 3570K, which is an older version of the i5, but it's overclocked to 4.0. So it's just it's all on butt. My computer is really quick. It's not the best, but it is quick, and it's running this game flawlessly at max settings, which is great. In fact, there are a lot of really cool settings here for PC that we weren't really sure we were going to get, but they're doing us right, and they need to be rewarded for that. People need to praise them for that. First of all, field of view goes all the way up to I think 105, which is crazy. It goes all the way down to 55, which is, you don't want to play at 55, but it goes up to 105, which is much higher. I run at 95 usually, which is what you see in the background. I noticed that because I watched a friend of mine play a lot of the first Destiny, and on the PlayStation 4, it had a fairly low FOV, and it was hard for me to watch, even from sitting quite a distance away from the TV. So having a nice field of view slider on this game is really nice. It goes up to 105, like I said. But then there's a huge host of graphic options that are all customizable. There's several different anti-aliasing. There's FXAA, SMAA, and MSAA. MSAA, I've noticed, really tanks my frame rate, but I think that's because I don't have the the newest drivers installed. It's one of those things I don't like necessarily installing the new drivers when they're there yet, because as a person who makes videos, sometimes the new drivers aren't the ones to have, so I always wait a bit before I pick them up, not running them on this build. So it could be even higher performance for all I know. But outside of that, they have all sorts of different texture and shadow quality and depth of field settings, including environmental detail, character detail, foliage and foliage shadow. All of those are distance detail, so rendered distance. So the further away you are, you know, if you have those turned all the way up, you'll see that kind of stuff, as opposed to if you have that stuff turned down, you'll gain a lot of performance out of it, and it doesn't really matter because it's super far away. It's hard to tell the difference, unless, you know, you're picky like me. On top of that, you could turn off light shafts and motion blur and stuff like that, which is great because that kind of stuff some people don't like, and on console it's hard to, you don't really have the option to turn any of this off, but on PC we do, which is awesome. They even have, and this is the cool thing, they have HDR support, so if you have an HDR monitor, which are starting to get out there, or if you're running the game on a TV, that's totally fine too. But they have HDR support, and they have dynamic resolution scaling, so render resolution scaling, which is crazy cool. So super sampling is a technique. I'm not going to get too far into it because it's not necessary to talk about it here, but super sampling essentially renders the game at a higher resolution and then outputs it to your monitor at a resolution that it would understand, and it essentially sharpens things up. So NVIDIA does this. It's called dynamic super resolution. You can essentially render a game at 4K if your computer can handle that. It will output it back to your monitor, and things will look significantly better, sharper even. And when you're doing super sampling, you can turn certain things off that aren't needed anymore, like anti-aliasing, which is an effect that clears up all the jaggies, you know, on different objects and whatever, so it doesn't look like, it makes it look more real because there's not pixelation going on. And when you're running at a higher resolution, that's automatically taken care of because it's rendering at a higher resolution. That the pixelation doesn't happen because the pixels are so tiny that you're not necessarily, you know, or rather the density of the pixels are there, so you're not getting all the jaggies. It makes it look a lot more smooth. So when a company who is publishing a game on console primarily, let's be honest, that's what Bungie does, and they're bringing a game to PC, and it's being a port, and then they add something like super sampling, we need to praise that. In fact, when this game comes out, I will likely super sample the game up to 1440p or maybe 4K, depending on what it runs like on launch, and just turn off, you know, things like anti-aliasing, which will give some of that performance back. And it will make the game look a lot better because you'll see in the background stuff, it is a little jaggy. But outside of that, like, that's a lot of the PC specific things. If you're a PC player, you'll understand some of that. There's different windowed modes. So you do window full screen or borderless windowed, and that's all really nice to have. You can turn VSync on or off. It's all really nice. Like, there's a lot of options here. But with that out of the way, let's talk about what really matters, which is the gameplay. Does it play well? Does it feel fun to play? And for the most part, I would say yes. In fact, the shooting feels really, really good. If you're a person who is familiar with Destiny, it's probably going to feel like Destiny to you. It's probably going to feel like Halo to you, but a bit tighter. And I personally don't have a lot of experience with those games because I didn't really play them. If you know me, you know that I grew up playing a lot of Unreal Tournament, a lot of Quake, a lot of arena shooters. So I like that fast-paced, very mobile gameplay with a very high skill cap because guns are almost always hyper accurate. So having a really good aim makes up a lot of skill in those kind of games, right? This isn't necessarily the case here, but the guns do feel as responsive as if you were playing an arena shooter. At no point do I feel like the guns aren't doing what I thought they would do, and every gun that I fired in the game thus far feels fun to shoot. It feels good to shoot, and it does exactly what I expected that gun to do, which is great. That's always a good way to have the visual feedback and the audio meet that of your expectations of what you expect that gun to do, because it's when those meet that things happen in your brain that tells you, like, this is a fun gun to shoot. This is a fun shooter. And in this case, Destiny 2 is a fun shooter, which is good, because you're going to be doing a lot of it in this game, a lot of it. Unlike games like Borderlands 2, for example, or all of the Borderlands games. I like Borderlands, don't get me wrong, but the shooting isn't great in those games. It's everything is very bullet spongy, which was the case in higher level stuff in Destiny, so take that with a grain of salt. But the guns in Borderlands 2 didn't always feel good to shoot, whereas in Destiny so far they do, and I'm really enjoying it. And the best way that I can actually give you if you haven't played the game, you won't know what I'm talking about here. So the best way to give you a point of representation of where you can understand kind of how I'm talking about the shooting is it feels a lot like Overwatch. So if you like Overwatch, you're going to like the shooting in this. It's about as fast as Overwatch, which is essentially just a slowed down version of Quake. So that's fine. And none of the guns feel like they have a massive amount of recoil to them. They all feel very easy to use. None of them are super skill based, but they all feel fun to shoot. They again, that visual representation of what the gun is doing, the damage that it's doing, and the sound that it's making is all meeting at one point, making it align with your expectations of that gun, which makes it fun to shoot. The menus themselves are a little obtuse. You could tell that they were designed for console, but it works. They're functional. It's kind of like playing No Man's Sky, except a bit better. No Man's Sky, especially with the recent updates, you're like, okay, this interface is pretty and kind of hipstery to a degree. You're like, you guys tried to have a very specific idea for this interface, but the flow of it doesn't necessarily work all the time. Kind of the same idea here. It's a really pretty interface, but the flow of it isn't efficient enough that you're able to kind of move between menus very quickly. Sometimes you have to go into several sub menus to kind of get where you're going, or when you're switching loot out, it's kind of weird. Whereas if you're playing a game like Diablo or any action RPG like that, the isometric action RPGs, where it just puts the gear in your inventory and you could just drag and drop it and just move it around, that makes things a lot easier. That's what PC players are expecting, especially if you play any kind of RPG, even shooters, But as of late, some of these shooter looters that we're getting, looter shooters, I think is the proper term, have kind of obtuse interfaces because they're designed for console as well. I'm looking at The Division is a really good example. That's kind of what this interface feels like, but it's functional and it hasn't necessarily gotten in my way, which is another good thing. It's just not super well designed. But outside of that, the audio is really well designed. The game looks pretty. Not the best looking game, as I said earlier, but it is a good looking game. The gunplay is really fun and will definitely carry this game for quite some time. Voice acting of what you get is really good. You get people like Nathan Fillion, for example. So there's some high build voice actors in here, which some of them were in the original Destiny, and I enjoy having them around as characters. I'm looking forward to seeing what that story content will be, because apparently there's going to be a lot of it, and I'm excited to kind of play through that, especially with friends. And then the strikes, I've done one strike. I think there is only one strike that it gives you. It's fun. It's kind of cool. It's unique. Again, it's got some voice acting and whatnot going on in it. It's got some platforming. The platforming feels really good. So jumping around in the game works. It's a little floaty, but it works and it's fun. The boss fight at the end was cool. It had some cool mechanics on it. It's just everything is coming together where if I could sit down and play through a lot more of the game, I would. But this should actually give you a pretty good idea of how I feel about the game as it currently stands. I was excited for the beta. I thought about it for a couple days now before the beta started, and I even got to the point where I'm an hour before the beta, and I had some things to clean up. I was doing dishes, and then I also had a video rendering, and I had all this stuff going on. I was like, I gotta hurry, the beta's starting. And then I got into the beta and I played through the intro, which was fun. It's, some of the content you're seeing in the background, and I played through the strike, and I got to the end of that and went, okay, I'm done. And I haven't logged back on. And the reason for that is because I know that there's nothing else there. I have no interest in the PvP. If I'm going to go PvP, I'm going to go play an arena shooter. I'm going to go play Quake Champions, or I'm going to go play Overwatch, or I'm going to go play Unreal Tournament. I'm going to go play a game that has good PvP. I have no interest in the Destiny 2 PvP. It's just not from what I saw from Destiny, it's just not my thing. My PvP is in highly competitive stuff like Quake or Overwatch or stuff like that. Not necessarily in this game. and that's fine. You know, I think that there's definitely a place for PvP in this game. It's not going to be my thing. So the fact that I can do the intro of the game, and I guess I could do it with the other two classes and try them out. I probably will, because I did enjoy that. So I did that. I did the intro and I did the strike, and I was just like, yeah, I'm done. I don't feel like I needed to play it anymore. And that's unfortunate because I was expecting to probably hit it a couple times this week, at least for, you know, several hours, and kind of really dig deep into it. But there just isn't anything there, and that's fine because that's what the beta is. So that should tell you a lot. Like, the game is really fun. I enjoyed what I had of it, but I never really felt the need to keep grinding out the same content over and over and over again. I think that's because I know consciously that there isn't anything there and that I want to wait. I want to wait for the game to come out and to actually put down time into it when it does so. So I'm looking forward to that, but at no point did I really feel the need to go back. So I guess to conclude my thoughts, it is a very competent shooter that is very fun. I need to stress that, like, it is a very fun game. It runs really well on PC. There's a lot of really good PC options from a PC standpoint, from the PC a port standpoint of this. It is very, very good, and they did an excellent job. Actually, they went above and beyond what a lot of other companies have done in the past, and you got to appreciate them for that, probably because a lot of them play on PC and are looking forward to having this game that they make on PC. And I could totally understand. I get that. But at the end of the day, it's launching on console very soon, and we're going to be able to see what the rest of the game is like, if there's a lot of content there or not, and that will determine whether or not it's worth picking up at launch. Personally, you know, doing this kind of stuff is my job, so like I am going to get the game anyways. But if I wasn't, if I had no interest in Destiny, I would have no issue waiting until the middle to end of October to see if the game is any good, and then just picking it up then. But yeah, it's in a weird situation because it is launching first on console, so we're gonna be able to see, you know, whether or not this game is any good, especially from an end game point of view, because essentially it is an MMO, and you have to treat it kind of like an MMO in that aspect. You know, is there going to be enough raid content? Is there going to be enough strikes? Is the PvP content going to keep the PvPers around? Is the gear grind going to immediately fall off the moment you start doing raids and now you have the best gear and, well, there's nothing else to do in the game? It's an interesting situation. This is Bungie's second go at this. They did a pretty good job. They did an above average job with the first game, and a lot of people really enjoyed what they played of it. But at the end of the day, it didn't really keep people around for very long, and that's fine. And the expansions brought people back. But let's see what they can do the second time around for their end game stuff and for the promises that they've made on that kind of stuff. Because, you know, we're already seeing some really good examples of multiplayer games, not necessarily MMOs, but let's call out one in particular. World of Warcraft is doing a very good job keeping people playing this expansion with Legion, because they have come up with a really good idea with these world quests and how those all work, and dynamically doing new content and adding that in on a very frequent basis. You know, that is keeping people playing. Is Destiny 2 going to be able to come up with something similar? Obviously, they're not going to live up to a company that has been doing this for well over 10 years, but are they going to be able to create and this is where I'm getting at here, are they going to be able to create a content cycle for this game that doesn't just revolve around a couple expansion packs and it being a burst of content and then you kind of fall off and don't touch it again? Is there going to be stuff to continuously do in this game that are going to keep people playing? I don't know. And I'm kind of curious to see how it's all going to shake down, honestly. But at the end of the day, it is a good game. I'm looking forward to it. My thoughts are that you should also be looking forward to it because it is fun to play. And I think especially if you can get some friends, these games are always more fun with friends. If you can get some friends playing with you at launch for the PC, it's going to be a huge amount of fun for a lot of people. And I think that it's not going to have any issues. There were some issues that I saw pop up at the beginning when the beta first started for PC that people were having. I didn't run into any of the errors people were getting. The servers have seemed stable. I didn't get disconnected at all. I didn't see any lag. I didn't see any frame rate drops. You know, my frame rate again stayed above, well above 70 almost always. And even the situations where it's doing the cutscenes and it's running at 30 still looked fine. You know, it didn't look choppy or anything. It definitely didn't look like it was running at 60, but you know, it's a cutscene that looks cinematic in nature. That's a terrible word for that. It looks like a cutscene, and I think that's fine to have that kind of thing. Especially because it's not something that you're interacting with. You know, when you're interacting with something at 30 frames per second, it feels a lot different if you're watching something at 30 frames per second. Likewise, if you're interacting with something at 60 frames per second, as opposed to watching it at 60 frames per second, it's a different kind of thing. So the fact that those cutscenes are locked at 30, it's fine. The PC port is really, really good. And you know, Blizzard's done a good job with the infrastructure in the background. You know, I see my friends on, like, I have all these crazy Battle.net friends. I see them all in it. They're all playing the game. They seem to, it works where I can whisper them and I'm in Heroes of the Storm, or I'm in, you know, any other Blizzard game, and it pops up and they can see it and they can whisper me back. The framework is there. It's working. You know, Battle.net, of course you would expect it to work. And at the end of the day, the servers are running fine. So I don't see any issues with the PC beta, and I was expecting some. It's kind of weird. So I'm a little disappointed, you know. I was expecting some issue, and I haven't gotten any. But those are my thoughts, and I want to know what you guys think of the beta, because you'll be able to pretty much play it for free, I believe, starting from the 29th, which is the day this video is going up, on for a few days until the beta stops. So now's your chance to pick it up, see if it runs well, you know, do that kind of stuff, get the game running. Also install the new drivers for the game ready drivers if you're running NVIDIA, to make sure that you're getting the best out of your performance. I might make an updated video on that performance if I see a significant difference between the two drivers. If not, then it's probably not that big of a deal. And I want to know if you guys want to see anything particular with this. If you want to see the PvP stuff, then I'll go check it out, and I'll report back on that as someone who has quite a bit of competitive experience. But outside of that, then, you know, it's a game. It's a good game with a few things in the beta that we don't really get to see outside of that. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what the real game is. And I want to know your guys' thoughts on whether or not you're even interested in Destiny 2. Because if you are, and there's a huge push for it, then I probably will do stuff when it launches on the PC and actually do series on it. But you know, outside of that, it's just a fun game for me to kind of mess around with my friends, and that's kind of how I've been treating it thus far. But I've been having a lot of fun, and that's the best you can say about a game. So with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.